Well, thanks very much, everyone. After that awesome keynote by Jacob, it's a pretty hard act to follow, but at least I feel a little bit more comfortable by saying, welcome, comrades. So we're here today to talk about guerrilla data liberation. I want to show you some real-world examples and practical applications so that you can see why you should be engaging in data liberation. I'll show you that you don't have to wait for government or organizations to hand you data. You can do it right now and make things that are useful for people. We'll look at how ScrapeWiki is a really straightforward way for you to begin to change the way you think about the web, from being a bunch of websites and applications to being full of tasty data that is the seed for awesome and useful projects. But first, let's start off by working out what I mean by guerrilla data and liberation. As you know, there's all sorts of amazing bits of data hanging around on the web. Government spending data, environmental incident reports, nuclear power plant uptimes, crime statistics. This data is what most people think about when they hear the term open data, and this is what I'm talking about when I talk about guerrilla data liberation. The ability to use projects like ScrapeWiki to quickly pick off public data that you need, that's in the public interest, and to not ask for permission up front. Of course, there's a place for formally opening up government and public data, but we can achieve a great deal informally in the truest open source traditions. You don't have to wait for government or organizations to hand you data. Any one of you can do it right now and make a real difference. But, you might say, doesn't that mean I'm advocating breaking the law? Let's be clear here. I'm talking about data that is, or should be, public data. I'm not talking about personal data, and I'm not talking about cracking. I am, however, telling you to practice some civil data disobedience. Spending time decoding vague and generalized copyright statements, disclaimers, terms and conditions is a waste of your time. If you know that morally, the data you're scraping should be open and accessible, go right ahead and do it. The results will surprise you. You'll find that nastily worded copyright statement was actually just a boilerplate agreement thoughtlessly slapped online. You might find, as I have, that organizations you're scraping the data from think what you're doing is fantastic and even want to help out. In the free software community, we're used to this. We act like the world works we think it should, and then we wait for reality to catch up. And while it may take a while, eventually it does. Our weapon of choice in this talk is ScrapeWiki. So obviously I'm going to be talking about scraping. I first came in contact with scraping when I started working for corporations that would scrape data out of their legacy green screen systems that no one knew how to hack on anymore. They would write software that hooked up to a text terminal like this and extract data out of the different fields. So in other words, they'd turn this relatively unstructured data that is formatted for display on a screen to a human into structured data that is formatted for a machine. At the time, I thought it was mad. How could you not understand how your own systems worked? But what I've come to realize, though, is that they were simply doing the most practical thing. It was less important in that situation to be elegant and efficient, and more important to be quick, cheap, and simple. Thankfully, today, most of us aren't getting data from green screens and mainframes, but from the web. Web scraping involves downloading web pages, funnily enough, and extracting data from them. As most of you, I hope, know, web pages are made up of HTML, and we can use this markup to extract data out of them. As a super simple example, just to get you started, here what we want to do is get the text displayed on a hyperlink and output it to our console. This is a really simple example, and I'll run through a little bit more of a complex one later in the talk. The top code snippet shows you roughly what a link looks like in HTML, and I hope all of you are pretty familiar with that. The second code is some Ruby code, and what this does is it extracts the text from the link and just displays it to us on a console. In line 1 of the Ruby script there, we require Guerrilla, and that's an HTML parsing library that Ruby uses. Starting on line 3, we just put our example HTML in a variable called HTML. On line 8, we ask Guerrilla to parse that HTML and stuff it into another variable called page. The last line is where we search for the link so that we can get the text out and display it. We just say page.at and then the element we're looking for, which is an A element in this case, and then we call inner_text on it to get the text within that link. I'm pretty sure that all of you can see that this is pretty simple stuff, and maybe you're getting the sense that it's something that all of you can do. So that's easy Ruby web scraping. And what Scraper_Wiki does, which is the topic of this talk, is make all of that easier. It simplifies a bunch of the common scraping tasks that we need to do, like running code regularly to get fresh data so you don't have to set up cron on your own systems to run your scrapers. It also takes care of storing the data for us, so we don't need to worry about setting up a database or something like that. And it also lets us know if, or sorry, when, because this is scraping, our scrapers fail. So it sends you an email when one of your scrapers experiences an exception. It's also collaborative, so that anyone can fix problems with other people's scrapers. Anyone can download the data and also inspect the code that generated it. Being able to fix problems with other people's scrapers is really powerful. Scrapers are delicate, they break often. All that needs to happen is a small change in the source website and the whole thing falls over. Remember how I said scraping was a practical way to just get things done? Often this means that people that originally created the scraper aren't interested in fixing it anymore. They got all of the data they wanted, but now you might need the same thing. If they put their scraper on Scraper_Wiki, you can just jump right in and fix the problem without having to start from scratch. And that's what puts the wiki in Scraper_Wiki. So I want to do a little bit of a tour of the Scraper_Wiki website now. This is the home page, and as you can see, there's a Create a Scraper button, so you can click that and jump right in and start creating a scraper. You don't need to create an account to be able to do that, so you can just give it a go as a guest. At the bottom of the screen, there's these featured scrapers and views. You probably can't see them too well. They're quite small. What the Scraper_Wiki do is they choose these from time to time when they see a bit of interesting data on Scraper_Wiki. The first one here is German company data. That data is used by a project that I'll delve into a little bit later called Open Corporates. Next one along is a list of power stations in Mexico. The third one there is pretty interesting. It's a map of geocoded tweets that come from the @Tahrir Twitter account. That was used during the Egypt protests of the Arab Spring. If any of the protesters needed supplies, they'd send a tweet and this account would publicize those requests so that people wanted to support the protests could help out by bringing along supplies like bandages or water or something like that for the protesters. The last one there is a list of Brazilian senators. And you might think that that's pretty basic data and surely that's available online somewhere. I mean, you know, elected representatives, of course that's going to be online and easily available. You'd be surprised how often that kind of data isn't available, or at least isn't available in an accessible format. And I think that that's what the case is here. They're turning a website that just say has a list. I don't know, it might even be a PDF. It's that bad sometimes, and then putting it into reusable data. With Scraper_Wiki, it's then got an API, and then you can build a website to say, find out who your senator is in Brazil. Once you click Create a Scraper, you can choose what language you want to write your scraper in. Scraper_Wiki supports Python, Ruby, and PHP. JavaScript is also planned, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see that pretty soon. The great thing about supporting all of these different languages is that there's a good chance that you've had experience with one of them. So it's pretty simple to get started. But even if you're not a coder, Scraper_Wiki has some excellent tutorials. They've got video guides and copy and paste guides that cover all the major bits of functionality available on Scraper_Wiki, and also the major scraping techniques for different websites. Once you've chosen what language you want to write your scraper in, you're popped into an online code editor. It does all the usual nice things like syntax highlighting, allowing you to use tab to indent your code. At the bottom of the screen is the Run button. So when you hit that, all of your code is submitted to Scraper_Wiki. A virtual machine is created and your code is executed. Once your code has started to return things, you see it here in the console. So if there's any exceptions or something like that, you can click on it and get the full backtrace so you can find out what went wrong. If you've written it well, hopefully it'll be collecting some data, and that appears in the Data tab in a structured format, so you can see the columns that you're extracting. There's also the Sources tab, which lists all the URLs that your scraper hit, so you know that it's actually working and going out to the right website. And lastly, there's this chat tab, and that allows you to chat in real time with other people, which is really cool if you're just getting started with scraping. You can invite someone else to come on the scraper with you, you can ask them questions, and they can respond in real time. Once you've written your scraper, given it a name, and hit save, you can then come to this page, which is the scraper detail page. It's got a heap of information on it, and I'll run through that quickly. Under the name, there's some details about each scraper. So this one's written in Ruby. It's getting data from that e-planning URL. And there's 2,367 records, and it's a public scraper, so anyone can see it. There's also a button to edit and copy this scraper. The great thing about this is that if you see a scraper on ScraperWiki that's scraping a page similar to something that you want to do, so maybe it's a common system, so for example, planning alerts, which is a project I'll talk about in a little while, it's quite often for different councils to buy the same planning system, and so what you can do is you can identify that this council is using the exact same planning system to something else that's been scraped on ScraperWiki. So you go to that scraper, hit copy, make the small modifications like the URL, and voila, you've got yourself a scraper. There's also this big notice telling us that this scraper looks broken. Whenever a scraper throws an exception, you get a notice like this, and you're also emailed, which is excellent because then you know that there's a problem. But also anyone else browsing the ScraperWiki website can see this, and they can say, oh, I might want to help out and fix this scraper for someone else. It also tells me when this scraper is scheduled to run. By default, scrapers on ScraperWiki only run once. They don't run regularly. This is because it's quite common for people to maybe want to scrape one bit of data and that's it. But if you want to get fresh data, you need to come to this page, hit edit, and then you can change the schedule to be run once a day, once a week, once a month, that kind of thing. Oh, the weird fuzzy grey blob in the middle there is a screenshot of this scraper, but it's just scraping an RSS feed, so that's just text, so it doesn't look very pretty here. But on other scrapers, you'll see a real image of the page. So if we keep scrolling down this page, you can see the data store. ScraperWiki uses an SQLite-backed data store. So you can do some quite advanced things with the way that you save data. This scraper is pretty simple. It's only got one table. So because it's an SQLite data store, you can save data in multiple tables, do relationships between that data and things. This one's only got this one SW data table. And as you can see, we're storing development application data from the Parramatta City Council in New South Wales. So we've got a description of the DA, a URL where you can get more information, the date they received the DA, an ID for the DA, and an address for the DA, and some more data, obviously, further along. Up in the top right there, you can see buttons to download all of this data. So you can download the entire SQLite database, or you can download a CSV file of just this. So it's really simple if people want to just say analyze data in LibreOffice. ScraperWiki's also got an API, which is awesome. That's the thing that you'll use to build amazing applications, because it means that you can hook your application right up into your ScraperWiki data. It supports all the usual formats like JSON and XML, so pretty much whatever your app's using, you'll be able to get the data using the ScraperWiki API. If we keep scrolling down, you can tag scrapers on ScraperWiki, so you can keep them organized. There's also a full history of each scraper. It shows you when the scraper was run, so that's automatic runs and things like that, how many pages it hit and how many records it saved during those runs. There's also a full edit history there, so it'll show you things like the diff of the code change when someone else or yourself makes changes to the scraper code. It's also got a rollback button there, so if anyone comes along and changes your scraper in some way that you don't want it to, you can just roll back the scraper really easily. There's also a chat or discussion section where you can ask questions about someone else's scraper. That then gets emailed to them, obviously, and then that's just always displayed at the bottom of the scraper there. This is what the browse pages look like. So this is a search for all scrapers tag planning alerts, which is what I mentioned before, a project I mentioned before. The cool thing about these pages is they've got a nice little overview of each scraper. So this top one here has 118 lines of code, 94 rows of data, and it's written in PHP. And just as before, you can see that this scraper has got a problem. So if you're browsing a whole bunch of scrapers, you can really easily visually see that, oh look, I've got 3 or 4 broken scrapers. I need to go in and fix them up for them to be able to get more data. So that was a quick whirlwind tour of the ScraperWiki website. I'm not a ScraperWiki core developer. I'm just a fanatic user. But I just wanted to mention a few things about the ScraperWiki project itself. So it's the organization behind ScraperWiki is actually a for-profit web startup, but all of the code they produce is FOSS. And of course, like most things these days, they rely on heaps of open source code. The front end is written in Python using the Django web framework. Of course, it all runs on Linux, and that's how your scrapers are actually run. They use LXC, which is containers for Linux. These are really lightweight VMs. So as I said before, when you hit run on the scraper, an entire VM is actually created to run your code, and all of that happens in a blink of an eye. It's pretty amazing. So it's all good and well to get all of this great data, but at the end of the day, it's what you do with it that counts. So I want to run through a few examples of some different projects that have been built out of data that was scraped using ScraperWiki. My first example here is a really ambitious project called Open Corporates. Their mission is to create an open database of every company in the world. It's really common for companies to span multiple countries, so their goal is to be a single, open, and accessible data store where you can go and find out about a company. One of the tools they use to gather their 30 million companies in 35 jurisdictions and counting. Australia is not one of them. Someone want to fix that up? I'm in the process. Scrapers are on ScraperWiki. Go on, hack it, do it now. I expect to see it by the end of the talk. So what they did is they put out a number of bounties to the ScraperWiki community so that they could get data from all around the world, including Australia. So you might even get a few £100, I think it was, if you write the one for Australia. Here's what a search for Telstra looks like. Not surprisingly, they've got a number of companies in different jurisdictions around the world. As I was researching this talk, I saw something a little bit fascinating. I saw that they've got these companies registered in Bermuda. So I did a bit of Googling, and I discovered that these are the companies that Sol Trujillo set up to buy a $254 million controlling stake in the Chinese real estate website Sufan. Pretty amazing what you can find out with a little bit of open data, eh? Not only that, but by building a project like Open Corporates, they've enabled all sorts of other awesome uses of that data via their API. This is a project called Openly Local, which, amongst other things, tracks local government spending over in the UK. And thanks to Open Corporates, you can now see more information about companies in that spending data displayed right here on the payment page. So my next example is a project that I'm heavily involved with here in Australia called Planning Alerts. You just enter your street address here, hit search, then enter your email address, and whenever there's a development application, you get an email about it. This means that you can find out if that beautiful old pub down the road is about to be knocked down, or a big, ugly apartment block is going up a few blocks away. In addition to email alerts, we also turn this, which is what development applications currently look like probably in your council. Well, this is actually quite a good one for councils. Quite often they'll be just stored in PDFs or something, so you'll need to download a big PDF, and it looks almost as dry as this. So we turn this into this, which I think you can see just from a quick glance is much more useful. When we started this project, we could have sat down with councils, all 500 around Australia. We could have explained to them what we wanted to do, the benefits. We could have worked through standards, what kind of data standards we were going to do, and tried to get agreement between them. And I think you can tell pretty quickly that that wouldn't have worked. So what we did is we went right ahead and just built the project. Most of the data that the council stores has copyright notices on front of it. And so by us ignoring all of those copyright notices on many councils, so we currently support over 100 different councils, by ignoring all of those copyright notices, it kind of makes Planning Alerts a mass copyright violation project. So Being a mass copyright violation project, what kind of response did we get? Like lots of angry emails from councils, cease and desist letters from lawyers? No, on the contrary. We've had councils contacting us, thanking us for our work, fair enough, asking us how they can get their data onto planning alerts, and even building APIs for us to get the data really easily. Another thing is that what we have had councils contacting us is we supply Google Maps, so they can display something like that on their website, embed a Google Map on their website, has pins for all the different development applications. We've had councils do that. So here's the scenario. We go in, click I agree to the terms and conditions, ignore all the copyright stuff, download the data onto our website, then they put that data that we've just violated copyright with back onto their website. It seems pretty perverse, but I think it's pretty awesome. That's guerrilla data liberation in action. Another project that heavily used ScraperWiki was the AlphaGov project. This was a government project in the UK to experiment with a user-centric one-stop shop for UK government services. They used a huge bunch of ScraperWiki scrapers to liberate data from, well, themselves. Things like public holidays, who the ministers were for government departments. It was quicker and easier to write scrapers for all of the different departmental websites than going to them, getting permission, and having to get the data in a sane format. Sounds pretty familiar, right? So a quick recap. Don't wait for government or organisations to hand you data. Any one of you can do it right now. Don't spend time wading through copyright statements, disclaimers, terms and conditions. If you know that morally the data you're scraping should be open and accessible, go right ahead and do it. Engage in some civil data disobedience. ScraperWiki is an excellent tool to help you do this. Takes care of running the scrapers regularly, storing the data and code side by side, and helps you share the load of writing and maintaining scrapers by allowing you to collaborate on it with others. And also, once you've opened data, this opens the door to making awesome applications that can make a real difference. They can make the corporate world more open, change the way citizens have a say in the development of their built environment, or even help out, in a small way, changing governments. Right, let's do a little bit of scraping. This is the Ballina Council's development application page. There's some terms and conditions there, but as I said before, we're just going to ignore those. If you look closely, there's an RSS feed, like really closely. And RSS is machine readable, right? This is what an item in the Ballina RSS feed looks like. It's pretty messy, and that's kind of the point. For us to be able to reuse bits of data for a project like planning alerts, we're going to need to make it a little bit more structured and pull some of the fields out that we need. The first one I can see up there is the ID field, so we'll need that. Next one is a link to the source development application so that we can provide a link back to the original source data for users. Down here in the description field, so we're going to need to split this up, is the address and the actual description of the DA. And lastly, there's the publish date, so I think we can assume that that was the date that they received the development application. So store all that in your head. This is the ScraperWiki code that we need to write to extract all of that data. You can tell I'm a sysadmin, right? Like, this is my live demo. I'll just walk through the code. Complexity is the enemy of reliability. Okay, I'm going to run through it pretty quickly, so don't worry if you can't keep up, but I just want to give you a sense of what you need to do to scrape the web. First line, we require the Ruby RSS library. That means that we can then parse the RSS feed a bit later. In line 3 and 4, we're putting the URL of the RSS feed in a variable called URL. On line 6, we get the RSS library to download and parse the RSS feed, and we put it in a variable called feed. Line 8 here is the start of a block. Because there's lots of development applications, we want to iterate over each one so that we can save them separately. Line 9, we're starting to create a Ruby hash called record. This is what we're going to use to temporarily store all the data in before we then save it a bit later on. Line 10 is where we're extracting the data from that RSS that we saw earlier. Here we're grabbing the item's title using the split function of Ruby, which splits up the text delimited by spaces, because if you remember there was that title field, and it had the ID at the start, a few spaces, and then some other junk that I can't even remember what it was. What this does is split that up and then just grab the first item out. The next two lines, 11 and 12, pretty much the same kind of thing. This is the description field that I said that we were going to need to split up. This is used as the split function, but delimits it by a full stop, as you can see there, and grabs the first and the second item out. And right at the end, it also calls strip on it, which is a Ruby function that just clears any spaces or white space off the end and beginning of a string, so that we've got some nice clean data to save into the data store. By now, hopefully you're getting the hang of all of this. It's all pretty simple. 13 and 14 are grabbing the link field from the item for the info URL and comment URL that we're going to save for planning alerts. Line 15 is formatting the date of the application, year, month, and day. And line 16 is just setting a date scrape field so that we know when we save this particular record. And it's just using the current time. Line 19 then saves all of this to the ScraperWiki data store. So the first argument, council reference, is the unique field that we're telling ScraperWiki that we want it to use, and record is just this hash that we created. So that just saves it straight into the data store using their SQLite back data store. If we now hit run, you can see that our data tab's now populated with all of the nice structured data fields. If we went back to the main ScraperWiki data detail page, we'd see all those records now in the data store. And that's it. If you want to change the way something works, scrape it. Do you think the lobbying system in Australia sucks? Well, then scrape all the lobbyist registers and make an awesome app that exposes that data nationwide. Do you find it difficult to work out when the next bus is? Scrape that timetable site and make a simple mobile web app that tells you when your next bus is going to come. One scraper can make a difference, and I hope you guys write that scraper today. Thanks very much. By the way, I think this is the official conference meme, isn't it? I've seen it in a few different talks now.
I had mine, I've seen it in at least two others.
Honestly, I did it before I saw anyone else's talk.
We noticed that. We noticed we're talking on IRC, you had the dates there of the 12th of 2010. We were going, how did you manage to get your presentation finished like a month ago and everyone else is doing their presentation yesterday?
Cool, any questions? I know I ran through the code kind of thing pretty quickly, so happy to take any questions on that. Or I know you guys are real hackers. So.
I'm busy running scrapers.
Just a general question. That's awesome. Thanks for the talk. But why planning DAs? That's a curiosity.
So planning, basically, where did planning alerts come from? So like a lot of the open data projects here in Australia, we were kind of inspired by the UK. So that project came out of the Government 2.0 task force. The Open Australia Foundation actually got some seed funding to build the prototype. And what we did is we took some open source code built by some very smart guys over in the UK and ported it to Australia. And then since then we've enhanced it greatly. It's now a Rails application that does all sorts of crazy things, including like all of the maps and the street view that you saw there. Another feature that we introduced last year, I'm still getting into 2012, but last year was commenting. So anyone can go straight onto a development application, and then right there is a comment field. They just fill in their details, their name and address, because it's normally required by councils, and a comment. So, I don't want this beautiful old pub to be destroyed. I really love the fact that there's a new small bar opening up down the street, that kind of thing. And then that comment gets submitted to council as an official submission. So you can now actually have an impact on your built environment. So that's basically why,
Just a question about the data itself. Do you find that sometimes it's not entered properly into their websites and it gets like jumbled up and stuff like that?
Yeah, and that's kind of a common problem with scraping, right? Quite often you've got some pretty nasty data, and that's why scraping's got a bit of a bad rap, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to give this talk. Yeah, sometimes it's nasty, but if it's going to get you 98% of the way or 95% of the way there, I think it's worth doing. I know that open corporates, because it's quite important that they get the right data, what they do is they first scrape it on ScraperWiki and then they use Fusion tables to clean it up before it gets imported right into the actual application. I think that's how it works anyway. So there are ways you can still clean up your data if you're really concerned about data quality.
I'd like to do... Sorry. I need to scrape the world's ugliest web page, which is my mobile carrier's how much data have you used this month. Any hints on where I can start? Because I can program, but I can't web.
Fair enough. Yeah. Okay. So, basic process that I'll do is try and work out what technology the website's made in, because some real painful ones, not surprisingly, you know, I'm at a Linux conference, I better bash Microsoft at least once, is ASP.NET. They're awful with all of these crazy view state things and voodoo and magic that you need to do. But the great thing about ScraperWiki is you can go and have a look at code. So find out what kind of technology they're using, and then maybe have a bit of a browse through other code on ScraperWiki to get some ideas of how other people have scraped similar websites. And then, yeah, use all the usual awesome tools like Firebug to then, you know, work out what elements you want to extract, and away you go. I mean, the examples I used there were in Ruby, and yes, please don't shank me. I've already been shanked a few times at the conference for being a Rubyist, you know. Sorry, I program in Python, yeah, that's it. But I love Ruby because it's really quite easy to write really awesome web scrapers in. With Mechanize, you can interact with forms and things really easily, which is very cool and probably something that you'll need to use for logging into a website like your mobile carrier, Vodafone. Ah. But yeah, feel free to grab me as well if you want to during the conference. I know we don't have much of it left, but I'd be happy to help out.
Do you know of anywhere that has improved the accessibility of their website to scrapers as a result of what's been happening, what you've shown us?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said before, some of the councils have actually proactively contacted us, said, hey, we want to get our data onto planning alerts. And we've got a little section on planning alerts that says, hey, if you're from a council, we'd love it if you put it in this XML format that's kind of really, really simple. And you know what? They've gone and done it. And it's normally like one person at the council that's just motivated to do it, and then they'll go and build a view in their CMS, some awful CMS. You know, I can just smell the pain through the emails that they send us. And they build a view that's this XML output, and then all I do is just add it to the back end of planning alerts, and I don't need to do anything. And I think that's amazing. It's awesome. And so that's kind of, you know, why I want people to start engaging in guerrilla data liberation. By getting all these little projects happening, I think we can all move the whole state of open data forward. And by showing practical applications, it means that people in government start to realize, hey, this is a really good thing, and I'm getting benefit out of it.
So if I could just follow up with that, so there's hope that the failure rate will reduce then.
So,
sort of because of the failure rate with broken scrapers.
so the comment was that the failure rate will decrease because we're doing this, and yeah, definitely that's what I'd hope, yeah.
So you mentioned some councils contacting you and trying to make it a bit easier for you to scrape. Are you actually getting any help from councils? Like, are they supporting you? And I guess, you know, giving you a bit of money or giving you some servers to use it on, or is it just being really, we'll make it more accessible?
Yeah, more money, that would be nice. No, it's fully volunteer driven, all of this. And I mean, I've got to give kudos where it's due. If a council's building a view for us in XML, that means that I just need to shove something into the back end of planning alerts. Well, then that's great, and good on them for doing that. But no, nothing else apart from that, really. And I mean, hopefully what we're doing is kind of showing people that, hey, you know, you can do it better, and maybe. It remains to be seen.
Hey, I'm actually quite a big fan of planning alerts. I've been using it for a while. Used it to actually lodge a objection to a
Awesome.
To a Max Brenner thing in my area, which was kind of quite cool. But anyway,
Awesome, that's great.
but I just was looking just then, like perhaps looking for funding disclosure of like, or gift disclosure from like a council in Bankstown or something. And for a start, it's not actually online. And if they are online, they seem to be in like a PDF format. How do you find working with PDF formats and scrapers?
To be perfectly honest, I've avoided it like the plague. I haven't done any PDF scraping myself. It's too mind-boggling for me. But there are examples on ScraperWiki about how to scrape PDF files, and the ScraperWiki community is awesome. There's a mailing list. You can go on there and ask questions. And I know other people have been doing PDF scraping, but not me so far, sorry.
Okay.
It depends. Sometimes it's a rasterized image and you've got those ones. So using OCR.
So a comment here was just that sometimes it's a rasterized image and you've got no chance apart from using OCR. I just wanted to make a comment on that. This is pretty awesome that a lot of councils, they scan all these documents that go into DAs, but obviously the scanner they're using is doing OCR in the background or something, and I don't think they even realize it. But you're definitely getting a rasterized image, but you can select all the text across it. And you can tell that it's been OCR'd because there are problems in the recognition, but I thought that was kind of interesting.
OCR text underneath the image, so you can still search in it, but it's got the actual image on it.
Well, that HP printer that you mentioned must be the one that they use or something. Yeah. Sorry, I've got another question here.
Can you tell us a bit about Open Data Australia?
The Open Australia Foundation? So the Open Australia Foundation is a non-profit here in Australia. It's all volunteer-based. Anyone can get involved, of course. Everything, all of the software that we produce is open source. Planning Alerts isn't the only project we run. We also run openaustralia.org, which downloads the federal government Hansard and republishes that in a much more easy-to-use format. So you can go on there, you can put in a term like Linux and find out when it's mentioned in Parliament, because Linux is mentioned in Parliament all the time, especially open source and free software, I don't think. But you can also see the transcripts with, the politician's image next to it and things like that. We also run a crowdsourcing project called Election Leaflets during election campaigns, where we ask people to take a photo of election leaflets with their phone camera or something, send them in, add a little bit of metadata, and hopefully provide a bit greater scrutiny during election campaigns. And we're also always interested in doing new open data projects. So just in the last couple of weeks on the Open Australia Foundation community list, there's been some discussions about maybe bringing an FOI tool here to Australia. So anything that interests you in open data or civic hacking, it's a great little community to engage in. So if you want to, if you've got an idea about a project or something, come onto the list and introduce yourself and tell us what you want to do.
You've mentioned about ignoring the disclaimers, agreements, copyright. That sounds personally reasonable to me. But when you start collating it, putting it up on the web, like the planning website, what risk do you see, or have you been attacked by councils and such to take things down?
So as I said during the talk, that's the awesome thing about it. It's kind of the opposite. And so I'm glad that you think it's reasonable, because I thought I was going to get a few questions about it being unreasonable. But the point is that I think this data should be open. I think it's morally it should be open. It's our data. It's public data. It should be public data. So I think it's reasonable to go and get it. But then when you build something like planning alerts out of it, I think it makes it even easier, because people can see, practically right in front of them on the screen there, why this is a good thing to do. They can see why people get positive benefits from it. They can see why they're getting more information, why that's contextual to people, why it's relevant to their neighbourhood. So our experience with planning alerts is that, I get emails all the time from councils, but not cease and desist letters. I get them saying, thank you, that's awesome. By the way, could we help out? We'd like to add more data and things like that, which is amazing. And what I hope by people engaging in guerrilla data liberation is that we kind of make this the norm. So by lots and lots of people doing lots of little things, agencies, government agencies and departments kind of think, well, this is the norm and this is good, and they can see these real practical projects that are useful.
What sort of websites can't be scraped?
My school. Honestly, they put on some really hard anti-scraping technology on that website, man.
And what is the anti-scraping technology?
I don't know, I can't remember off the top of my head, but that's the one I've had the biggest problems with, because I saw that, they'd put anti-scraping technology, and it's kind of like, a red flag to a bull. I'm like, I'll go there, definitely. But that's the main thing I've found. And accessibility, PDFs, they suck. Like, if there's anyone working in a government department, just put it all in PDFs and then I won't be able to scrape it, don't worry.
So is there any consensus in the community about what sort of web technologies pretty much defeat the Scraper Wiki?
Not so much, because where there's a will, there is a way, right? We've had some amazing talks at the conference about people cracking full-on encryption, right? And this isn't even encryption, this is just some broken web technologies or something. So there's always going to be a way, I think, but some just make it harder than others. ASP.NET is a real pain point because there's so much of it, especially in government departments. But there is a way to do that now. It's just a little bit more complex and a bit more time-consuming than a normal HTML web page.
Worst comes to worst, though, I've seen Flash scrape quite easily
So the comment was about scraping Flash as well, and I've never had any experience with that, but it's awesome to hear that people have done that. Thank you very much for all of those questions. That was really good.
Thank you. We're running out of time. We'll have to do it again soon. This is a thank you gift from LCA this year team. Thank you so much for the talk.
Cool. Thanks very much, everyone.